Hey everyone, Anders here, host of the podcast Lean In. And today with me, I have Ted Stephany, Director of Strategic Sourcing, aka Procurement at Workiva. And man, I'm excited to unpack what it is you do. Procurement is often misunderstood. And I think today's going to be a great chance to talk about what it is that strategic sourcing is responsible for. Often the audience tuning in here is people and talent leaders. And as they're looking to bring on new vendors, I think take some notes on how to work with your procurement partners today. So Ted, I want to say thanks for joining the show. It's been really fun learning from you, what it is that you do and how the procurement skill set and division has changed over time, especially since the Zerpa era. And then now where we are today with efficiency and AI. And we're going to unpack all of this and its impacts in procurement today. So without further ado, why don't you tell us your journey into procurement? Was this your major in university?
If only. Anders, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I've enjoyed our conversations as well, and absolutely misunderstood profession to be sure. I think if you look back when I was young, I loved strolling into Toys R Us, picking up the latest G.I. Joes or the recent release from the Nintendo. And I just knew at age 6 or 7 that I had to be in procurement. Absolutely not.
I want to be a procurement leader.
Absolutely not. I don't think anybody has ever decided that they want to go into procurement or sourcing, and certainly not me. It was a background in a mix of sales, of account management, corporate law, and I've been working in the tech space now for 17, 18 years. Right. And I just ended up in sourcing by chance, honestly. But it's become a ideal fit because I get to use the skills and the experience, really the best parts of my previous careers, whether that's the knowledge of SaaS, whether that's contract review and redlining, whether that's commercial negotiation. I use all of those things in my current role.
So I'm going to lead here with a joke/question. Yeah. So those of us that maybe use a recruiting or sales tool that's campaigning and sending messages to prospects, right? You'll see this sometimes on a LinkedIn profile of someone who's in procurement or strategic sourcing. I'm not in recruiting, don't message me for sourcing roles. And this is something funny. I often joke when I see that because I know they must be getting spammed by, either a uninformed junior recruiter sourcer or maybe someone who was lazy in setting up a sequence. But, I want to use that joke or funny circumstance to talk about what is strategic sourcing. Like let's define for the audience today, what is procurement and what it is that you're responsible for, those core functions. So then we can talk about how the function has evolved over time in your 17, 18 years and where it is today.
Well, that's a great question, and certainly receive my fair share of outreach and spam too. So Director of Strategic Sourcing. Has strategic become a buzzword at this point? I don't know if it has or not, but I'm almost embarrassed to have it in my title. But it's true. To me, it's aspirational. Maybe I'll come back to that. But at the end of the day, we support the businesses by effectively sourcing goods and services. Now, that could be from software to contract labor. It could be agencies and every indirect item in between. And my sourcing team could look a lot different from the sourcing team at Boeing, for example.
Right. Parts and plates and widgets. And
exactly. And there's a big divide between what might be direct and indirect. But at the end of the day, for me, it's that effectively part that I try to strive for that makes it more strategic, because it's more than just buying, which at the end of the day is probably the biggest misconception is we just spend our days buying. Yeah. And I need to ensure that it's the right goods and services at the right cost and the right quality. And is this a relationship with a supplier that we can sustain for the long haul? Is it someone that's interested in being with us more than just 6, 12 months?
Sure. So moving beyond transactional to relationship between organizations.
Exactly. And that's part of the role, is doing the analysis on the supplier relationship, talking to the stakeholders about what they truly need. Now, in a sense, our day-to-day can be absolutely tactical. And I suspect, like many of you, from the moment I get out of bed and I check my Slack messages, I'm in reactive mode. Which is why I say
mode.
Which is why I say it's aspirational to be strategic. I don't think you just wake up and are that all day, every day.
Sure.
But it's what I strive to be, to collaborate, to plan with those key stakeholders, and ultimately create the supplier relationships that help get us to our goals. That's what strategic sourcing is to me.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's important to unpack even further. Let's even narrow the conversation down towards given the nature of the Lean In podcast and the audience, tools that people and talent leaders might consume. Let's don't need to name drop, but we can talk about categories. Like an ATS or an EOR platform or something that I'm sure everyone tuning in today has investigated, researched, maybe done demos or RFI, RFP, and ultimately arrived at, a rip and replace or an implementation of a new, if there wasn't an initial ATS or EOR provider or some other tool, or it could be a recruiting tool or anything. How is it that you, a procurement team, source new tools? Is there a proactive approach as like the landscape is changing? Or is there more an ongoing investigation to like new features or cost savings or even more market fluctuations where now's a good time to consider cost saving switches? Like, how does that strategy play into, and again, a landscape like TA where things are changing really quickly in a market, macroeconomically, but then also with new technology?
Yeah. Great question. For better, for worse, too often it's a knee jerk reaction. I'll see a billboard or a commercial for the latest Pizza Hut pizza and
There
think,
you go.
hot damn, I need that in my belly now.
Yeah.
I was not hungry. I did not have that gap in my life that I
Large
needed to have.
pepperoni, please.
Right. But there I am calling Pizza Hut to deliver, which is far inferior to Lou Malnati's, but that's a conversation for another day. I see that the same way with my stakeholders when they see a shiny tool and it's like, I got to have that.
Got it.
And then that leads to the conversation of, okay, well, what are the requirements or what are the challenges or the gaps in your day to day? What's going to break if you don't get this tool in your life?
Mm-hmm.
And those are sometimes some tough conversations because we just want that shiny new thing.
Yep.
Or it's just not a high priority. And in this day and age, things are changing so fast. And you might be with one of the big players, let's say in the HCM marketplace, and you just see the core of what you do on your subscription, and suddenly they've got add-on after add-on after add-on. Don't even get me started about the AI add-ons.
Oh, yeah.
Now, do you review that through the lens of consolidation and just having one skull to crack, so to speak, just one supplier to deal with? Or do you want something that's very, built for purpose, specific to a single need or pain point?
Sort of a niche offering or,
Exactly.
yeah.
And those are the types of conversations that we're having, especially now when there's just new features and technologies coming out all the time.
Oh, yeah. It's impossible to keep up even if you're a frontline leader in the industry, taking TA tooling, for example.
Right.
And so how does one evaluate the rapidly changing landscape, right?
Yeah.
There demos?
It's not easy. Yeah. We're sitting through demos now, and you can lose somebody in the first 5 minutes if your interface looks wonky. But the biggest challenge I see is getting people to appreciate the tools that they have, to make sure that their processes and people are locked in before they go searching for a tool to make up the difference.
So jumping in with a question that my mind just immediately thought of the word adoption.
Mm-hmm.
And is procurement responsible, or how does the word adoption resonate internally? Let's take a tool as a sourcing technology that helps recruiters find talent. Let's just choose that as a broad, category. Is adoption investigated as it relates to the cost after a tool is onboarded? And if a new tool is we need this shiny ball AI co-pilot, is that evaluated in relation to an existing tool? How does that come in with procurement? And I ask because we've had many founders on the show recently who have founded AI tools that are doing supposedly consolidated tasks or, can source talent in an instant and even schedule. And there's this whole rapid evolution. And I think it's often misunderstood how building a tool, selling, and then, communicating with procurement and being able to then onboard, there's sometimes a knowledge gap there on how something is consumed internally.
Adoption is so important. So important. If we're going through the sales cycle, it should be top of mind.
Hmm.
The very first conversations is how do we enable the end users? How do we drive adoption? So that from the moment the ink dries, we're working with those end users and the champions to drive adoption and track adoption.
Right.
And one of the things that I like to do with our new suppliers, especially, is schedule those business reviews and QBR immediately. So we have those check ins at a regular pace so that my stakeholders, my champions, folks in biz tech and enablement can check on how adoption is going.
Yep. Yep.
Because too often we get to the anniversary or the renewal cycle and we're seeing statistics that say we've got 60% of our licenses sitting on the shelf.
Yeah.
Well, cue the difficult conversation on the renewal. So I think the suppliers from day one should be driving those conversations, standing by
Yeah.
the customer and the end user with best practices, with examples from how other SaaS companies are driving adoption. And together you can go through those business reviews and QBRs and start building momentum.
Sure.
And then when it comes time for you and I to talk about the renewal or extension of the contract, expansion or upgrades, we have this solid foundation of data because we've got some solid adoption.
Sure.
It's important.
It's inherently the vendor, the probably in this case the account manager for said tool really needs to drive past implementation but adoption and make sure that the stakeholder, the end customer, their point of contact, understands how to empower the team to use that, probably from an SLA perspective, beyond coaching even. Because in recruiting there's a joke often, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, or people will rely on the incumbent tools, some of which have been around a while, some of which are apparently going under. Rest in peace, Monster. If you saw the news this week, I think anyone who's been in recruiting more than 15 years used Monster at one point. And it's kind of an end of an era, and perhaps relevant to this conversation in more ways than one. I'm sure there were many procurement people who needed Monster at 2005 and beyond, and then and now it sounds like adoption wasn't there, and that's a different story in regards to their own product. But I think when we look at, and this is an interesting topic for procurement, but also just the tech industry, is AI is changing the landscape, and no one has a crystal ball and knows exactly how or when there will be dramatic change. But I wanted to ask you, it's a two-part question around AI changing, improving, optimizing procurement's workflows. Like, are there tools that you use, or is AI increasing efficiencies in your world? And then second part of that question, and I think I know the answer, is AI, or are AI tools in TA and recruiting just flooding the market and making a lot of noise right now?
Yes, on both counts.
Strong yes.
I mean, it's changing everything, right? And I think you've talked with guests on how it's changing the HR and TA space. Absolutely. Well, no surprise, it's changing sourcing as well.
Sure.
We're big on data. We're big on doing the research. AI is obviously making those tasks easier and faster. And what I can use ChatGPT to accomplish in a few minutes used to take me half an afternoon. I think the next step is how AI can help us predict perhaps where the market is going, where costs are going. Now, on the indirect side of the house, it's a little different, and maybe some of those insights aren't as critical to me buying services and software, but I've used AI as a negotiation assistant. I've typed in, certain broad fact patterns and said, hey, can you make some counter offer recommendations? Of course, I've used AI to make my presentation decks better, more interesting. Nothing gets a good laugh like an AI generated
emoji, bold, bold, bold.
I think my last deck included what I asked Gemini to do was Batman as a procurement professional.
Nice.
And
Gotham, baby.
As glorious as you might imagine in all its AI splendor. So there's a good entertainment aspect to it all. Now, on the buying side, of course, is AI and technology causing some issues? Emphatically, hell yeah.
Yeah.
We just got out of a pipeline meeting today where we were looking at all of the various requests coming through for either net new AI functionality or an AI functionality on top of an existing
Oh, wow.
supplier.
Yeah.
We can't keep up. We're trying to put processes in place to
Wow.
keep up, but it's expanding so quickly that it's changing the way we think about purchasing. It's changing the way we negotiate. So it's exciting and a little scary all at once.
So, and this kind of begs the question, but my assumption coming into this podcast was that procurement must be busier than ever because every existing tool probably, sorry, let me reframe even more general. Any software offering is desperately trying to add AI or calling it AI into their current features and new features or upsell opportunities for them. And then of course there's a clear increase in volume of new vendors, of new tools, of new softwares, especially as it relates to the people and TA functions. So, my thought was, how do you keep up? And then this kind of foreshadows a more broad question of the often misunderstood, often uh, perhaps there's some disdain or frustration around the RF blank, RFI, RFP, RFQ, RF,
Right.
insert here. And I think it would be fun, and maybe that's not the right word, but our chats are fun for me. But it would be interesting for you to explain to the audience today, maybe as it relates to AI tooling, but how do you use RF blanks
Mhm.
to gather intel from the market and then evaluate in an equitable, way? I've seen 1,001 RF blanks, and they're often very messy. There's different strategies and Google Sheets that are shared or downloaded, and there's confusion, and there's timelines, and there's pitches, and then sometimes the end result seems like maybe it was fixed all along from a friend with the C-suite, and or maybe it wasn't. But tell us more about how you use a process like that to drive some efficient outcome. That would be an let's start there.
Yeah. I'll use the word RFX to just capture the whole family of those things, which I appreciate fully. In most of the world, RFP is a 4-letter word.
It's a four-letter word with three letters. Yeah.
Yes. And it's incredibly valuable when done correctly.
Right.
I do not like throwing out RFX just for the sake of doing it.
Mhm.
There's a time and a place to do it. Now, whether that's after a certain number of years that you've been with a supplier and you just need to truly test the market, see how things have changed, whether that's because you are unhappy with the incumbent supplier,
Mhm.
enough that you have to change, or just enough that you want to keep them on their toes and say, look, this relationship, while good, isn't guaranteed.
Yep.
So I want you to know that I'm keeping my eyes and ears on the market, knowing that we do have options. Or maybe it's a completely net new something where there truly is a gap
Mhm.
or a challenge that you need to fill, and you need to go out and find a new supplier to do that. I do not like just sending them out for the sake of doing it because they're a lot of work. They're a lot of work for me.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why they get a bad name is they're just too many damn bad RFX. We don't think strategically about them. Our stakeholders have to be bought into the process. If I have to drag my stakeholders kicking and screaming into an RFX, it's going to be bad for everybody
Lose lose.
because I want to know exactly the gaps. I want to know exactly their must-haves, the
Yeah.
requirements. And those they don't come from me. They're going to come from the stakeholders and what they need to see. So without that, it's going to be a half-assed RFX.
Mm.
I'm going to really upset the suppliers. They're going to have a bad taste in their mouth and say, Ted, yuck. He's terrible to work with. He didn't respond to my emails. I
Right.
don't know what's going on with this. And even the best RFX are going to have hiccups,
Yeah.
and they're not just going to be a walk in the park, but they can be done correctly to help give us the right information on the marketplace to either, again, help us source an entirely net new product or service, help us benchmark against an existing supplier, or just because we need to know that we're getting into something that will be with us for a long time and
Right.
not just a flash in the pan. So there's many different reasons to do one. You just have to be sure you're ready to do it, that you're committing and you've got the empathy to understand the other side of the table. the commitment that it is on behalf of the folks that are bidding takes up a lot of time. Writing up those bids to doing the demos, question and answer. At the end of the day, you might not have anything to show out of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And it's
there's got to be an
interesting.
empathy probably there as well.
If we take the net new example and say
Mhm.
you're, a VPTA, and pick the example, one of the earlier examples, whether it's, a sourcing talent tool or an
Mhm.
EOR platform or whatever it might be. And you don't have one currently in the organization. So this is for
Mhm.
the people tuning in and who want to run one. You have someone in procurement who's about to give you an answer. And the question is, how do you initiate that with your procurement partner?
Mhm.
Hey, knock, knock, really want a new tool. We don't have this. Run an RFX.
Mhm.
And who then finds the short list of vendors? Is the VP talent, hey, I heard this tool's good, that tool's good, I saw them at Transform, and
Yeah.
or is it sit strictly on strategic sourcing, or is it a blend of both? How does that RFX initiate, and then how does the vendor shortlist accumulate?
Short answer, it's been a blend of both. But in terms of bringing us in, if you're a sales professional, bring me in early. If you're a stakeholder, bring me in early.
Yeah.
I want to see that you get what you need, contrary to popular opinion. If
Right.
there's a gap, there's a challenge. Let's fix it. Let's
Yeah.
collaborate.
Yeah.
To collaborate, we can never ask too many questions. I need to understand your why,
Yeah.
your drivers, of course, your budget. Hopefully, there is one. That's
Mhm.
when I'm at my best when we're a team and I understand what you're looking at. Have you been doing online research and you found some interesting suppliers you want to include? I'm also going to do my research. Now, whether that's a outfit like Gartner or I'm surfing G2 or the internet or our friends in AI,
Yeah.
I'll do some research as well. We did a EOR RFP in 2024, and that was a combination of who we knew in the industry. Maybe an executive has a relationship with someone at another SaaS company, and they say, "Hey, you ought to take a look at this group. We really like using them." Okay, great.
Yeah.
Then we might look at the Magic Quadrant. We might look at other reviews in the industry, and we'll put together our short list of who we want to invite. And I'll rely on the business to give me those must haves, those requirements, and we'll use those as part of the RFX process. But early is best. I had someone who came to me after talking with a software supplier for 9 months. They've done demos, they built up
Boy.
conversations, and then they come and say, "Hey, we want this."
Hey, by
Well,
the way. Yeah.
the challenge is, of course, nobody from legal is taking a look at it. Nobody from privacy or security. We actually have a purchasing committee that needs to review all of these purchases at a certain spend threshold,
Oh, yeah.
made up of our CFO, our CIO, and others who need to be aware. Well, 3.5 months later, we're actually able to sign on the dotted line because we had to backtrack and do all of these processes and procedures, recreate a mini RFP.
Oh, wow.
You know, it didn't have to be that way. It didn't have to be that way. And I'm so glad that the way we did the EOR RFP turned out the way it did because we had a meeting of the minds early on in
Sure.
terms of needs and strategy. And I think that ends up being a better experience for
Yeah.
the suppliers as well.
Yeah. Communicate early. So there's a theme on the show, which is communicate with stakeholders and cross-functional leaders early and
Yeah.
communicate clearly. Waiting, it's not a win for anyone.
Yeah.
Whether, you're looking for a new tool or new hire, or, looking at planning and forecasting budgets, whatever it is, early and often. And I actually want to kind of take the topic. You touched on this, but it sounds like there was an RFX, and there's kind of an example you just used, EOR platform. And I'm sure that process had a different lens, I'm sure Workiva and most every company in the tech landscape now has changed what they're optimizing for. We'll look at the procurement lens specifically, but
Mhm.
let's look at just two time periods. Let's go 2019, free money, Zerpa era, growth at all costs. And then let's look at, 2024 today, which, efficiency is the mantra and AI and, reductions are the theme. How has what you're optimizing for changed? And, what can people and talent leaders and their direct reports understand from that, from a business perspective?
Actually, what I'm seeing today reminds me a lot of what we saw. I'm going to go back even further, if you don't mind, to the late 80s and in terms of
I was a
law
toddler. It's perfect.
and legal, right? And I'm buying GI Joes and
Yeah, there
Nintendo.
you go.
Well, if you look at the heyday of personal injury claims, plaintiffs, lawyers, and I can say this because I spent some time as one,
Okay.
would file a sprain and strain claim as a result of an auto crash. And there were some nice awards
Hmm.
for both the plaintiff and the attorney. And I'm not making light of these injuries, of course, in any way. What we saw, though, was the insurance companies were asking themselves, why are we doing this? Why are we not putting these claims through more scrutiny? And why are we so quick to settle these claims? And things started to shift. And over time, the insurance companies had more leverage
Mm-hmm.
and the plaintiffs had less. And today, it's very difficult to recover from insurance companies for, well, frankly, many injuries, let alone those that are, I'll use the word minor, but I'll say relatively minor injuries are even tougher still. So, long-winded story. I see the same thing happening with software sales and staffing over the last few years. And I'll even set COVID aside,
Sure.
but companies are investing in purchasing departments to provide more diligence in their spend.
Mm-hmm.
And they're investing in those teams. Those teams are investing in leveling up their skills to help level the playing field. I think you'll see 3 or 4 studies even in the last 10 or 15 years that show the power shift to the buying side of the equation. So sales cycles slowing down a little bit.
Yep.
Now, maybe that's a good thing. If you're in my shoes, maybe that's a good thing that we're making more thoughtful decisions. Maybe there's a balance to be found in the pace of the cycle,
Yeah.
depending upon the industry in. But, in terms of staffing, it's not FTEs that are filling roles. EORs,
Oh, yeah.
contract contingent labor, Upwork.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of turnover now in the contingent labor contracts.
Yep. 1099 and temp to full time and every
Yeah,
and
yeah.
nearshore and offshore variations as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's such a downward pressure on compensation,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
so how do we change that balance? But those are the big changes that I see.
Yeah.
And of course, that's haven't had an impact on the way that I negotiate
Yeah.
in terms of drivers. You asked what, priorities are now, and it's got to be optimized for flexibility.
Yep.
It's got to be optimized for cost, and it's got to be optimized for data privacy. I think are the 3 big ones that catch my mind. Now, in terms of
Yep.
flexibility, we're seeing fewer long-term contracts, 1 and 2
Duration
years
is
the norm.
agreed.
We're scared to get in bed with somebody for more than a couple of years. Technology is moving way too damn fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
You commit to
For
anybody
5 years from now, this tool could be obsolete, or we might want to pivot or rip and replace, or
yeah,
and and you
it's
just reminded me of one of our first calls. A joke one of us threw out was, speed, quality, price, pick two is the old adage, right? And I think you just answered it. Speed is less important until it is, but I think, and I can confirm, when I'm talking to other stakeholders, price and quote quality, and I would put, security, governance, et cetera, under that category, are more analyzed than before, where during the 2000s all the way up to the 20 teens, speed was important. We need this tool yesterday, we need people yesterday, and often there was no review of price. It was just, yeah, send it, sign it. uh, and that has changed.
yeah. And believe me, I love my Gemini generated Batman silly pictures. But in terms of a lot of the AI technology,
Yeah.
that's inserting itself into the contracting process. Our privacy teams are scrambling to keep up. What are you doing with our data? Are
Yes.
you learning from us? Is it anonymized? Are you using it to train your model for us or for everyone? There's always the normal privacy concerns, but AI is turning everything upside down and giving us a lot more to chew on.
Yeah.
And of course, cost has always been there, but it's the need not just to keep things flat, but to actually reduce
Sure.
our spend year over year while still maintaining the same level of services.
Sure.
So as you might imagine, that's led to a lot of difficult conversations, especially with software providers. Don't even get me started on year over year price increases. But whether it's an agency or an EOR, we're looking hard at each of those SKUs and line items.
Yep.
And as you know, some of those EOR invoices can read a little bit like a novel.
Yeah.
So figuring out
What is?
where we're getting charged and for what is no
Yeah.
easy task,
Yeah.
but we have to do it.
Yeah.
We have to work to control costs across all of our supplier base. And it's not easy. I think it's perpetuating this myth that we're penny pinchers, right?
Sure. Sure.
And when the macroeconomics are the way that they are, when there's so much uncertainty, we can't help but look at every SKU to try to find ways to help the business.
And reduce waste, and whether waste is coming in the form of low or no adoption or price gouging, which we know can happen and does happen, and any variation of waste, any inefficiency, of course, needs to be discovered and ended. And it sounds like AI is helping you do that, and you're using it, let's say, for improving your production personally on Ted Stephany's desk. And now I'm curious, I'm going to ask my favorite question, my crystal ball question. How do you forecast AI changing? Let's go esoteric first.
Mhm.
Just broadly, the tech ecosystem, the tech economy that we're in. It's definitely the buzzword of the day. I feel like there's different camps evolving. I'll foreshadow your answer just with maybe what I see as I see two diverging thoughts, which is there's a camp of people saying everything manual that can be automated will be, entry level jobs are being replaced and will continue to be, companies will be smaller, everyone will be using AI tools. And if you don't learn them, your job will be replaced. And there's some fear mongering there. There's some big forward thinking in terms of what AI could do. And this is broad too, across engineering, product design, HR, sales, everything. Then there's another thought, which is, well, hold on, we're not seeing that yet. And actually, a more thoughtful human approach is how we want to go. Maybe minor manual tasks are what will be enhanced, but that this might be more bubbly than it is totally life-changing. And let's wait and see. I tend to get those two responses. Curious where you sit on the spectrum in terms of the AI buzz we're seeing.
Probably somewhere firmly in the middle. I don't buy into the fear mongering that we're all going to lose our jobs. I do think the reality is some will. I think being AI savvy be a prerequisite to many, if not most, hires going forward. Some knowledge. Will it decimate staffing? I don't think so. You need folks to appreciate it, to understand it. Now that may weigh heavily on the engineering and the R&D departments. Will it impact somebody like me? I've got ChatGPT to do some pretty good one-liners and dad jokes. So
I've
I
heard a
could
couple.
see
They're good.
I could see a day and age where I'm no longer needed. In terms of negotiation,
Yeah.
I'm probably not alone in feeling that it's a very personal
Yeah.
and human skill. And while it can assist in many ways, especially in the contracting, if you and I need to get a deal done,
Yes.
I don't see us both firing up our AI bots to do that conversation. So I'm cautiously optimistic about the impact AI will have.
I agree. I sit in the middle, and I kind of foreshadowed my answer, but I think both are true in some ways. Like you said, some jobs will be lost or replaced or look different.
Mhm.
But as time goes on, I think it's kind of funny. It's almost like a full circle realization. I did an internship in high school. I did a shadowing of someone really successful in their career. They were in sales. They sold fruit at scale and did very well, just very well. And they said the most important part of their skill set was relationships.
Mhm.
It was relationships. And that really stuck with me. That resonated. And that's something that I've used in my career to just have good, authentic relationships. And it's proven successful for me too, both with, candidates and clients and stakeholders. And whether I'm negotiating with a tool, like you said, I've been on both sides of the procurement fence many times, and AI can't replace that.
Yeah.
But it can help me be more efficient. Like you mentioned, the half of a day task that has turned into 30 minutes or less now. And I experienced the same thing. So I think we'll see more of that, and an increasing weight and importance on relationships,
Mhm.
especially at the senior level. So
True story. Funny you mentioned buying produce. A quick plug for my friends, the negotiation club.
yes, yes, I'm here for it.
We practice this stuff.
Yeah.
And These are just mock decks where we negotiate
Yeah.
a bushel of apples and the
Yeah.
price of apples. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Negotiate the cost of apples.
Yeah.
And we try to get used to just being uncomfortable in our conversations and going back and forth in those negotiations. So I know a lot about negotiating apples.
Well, there you go. How much is a bushel of apples these days? And is it the quality or the price, my friend? It's more important.
If you listen in on some of our mock calls, we go down some crazy rabbit holes.
Those Fujis are better than the Granny Smiths, so I don't know.
Right.
Well, Ted, it's been a pleasure. I've learned a lot in our conversations, and if you're still here, a lean in audience, I hope you've learned a lot as well. So, wanted to say much gratitude and thanks for joining the show today. It's been fun learning about procurement, and that word's not often used in the same sentence as strategic sourcing.
It is not. Usually it finds itself in, again, close to a 4-letter word.
Thanks again for joining us. Take care. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Andres.